fancy pants. All right. So everybody, well, probably both of the people watching, which would be me and Ronnie. Um, this is it. So this is the first episode of a new podcast, video blog, whatever this thing is. I've never done this before. I've been a guest on a podcast before, but never actually tried to run one. So I figured what better than to create a podcast where I'm actually the guest. That's how this is really going to roll, right? So the whole idea of this, I don't know, coffee with Coach or questions
I
with
like that.
Brian,
I like that.
whatever.
Coffee with
The
Coke.
problem is that name is probably taken about 1,000 times. We'll figure name to be decided later, TBD on that. But the concept here is just a conversation with athletes, right? So I'm a coach, Ronnie's an athlete, and what spurred this was really our weekly Zwift rides, right? Like I said to my wife at one point in time after these Zwift rides, I'm like, man, I should really start recording these because such good questions pop up during those rides. And I, go off on a tangent talking about it, and it's more questions and more questions. And I think we all walk away learning something from these things, me from the athletes and the athletes from me. So what better than to kind of bring this outside to the public with everybody? And I thought there was no guest I would want first than Ronnie. Hands down, no question. Because you know what? Everybody probably knows you. Even if they haven't met you, they know you. I'm like, that whole 7 separations from Kevin Bacon thing? I'm like, I bet you it's like 5 separations, 5 connections to Ronnie.
Okay.
It's true, right? Like in the New York triathlon, or now I'll say tri-state triathlon scene or Northeast triathlon scene, I think it would be hard pressed with somebody in a group doesn't know you.
It's funny. Okay.
But
Let's
it's
move
true.
on.
So Ronnie is definitely an endurance athlete, right? So I wouldn't say just a triathlete, but definitely an endurance athlete. Done some Ragnars, done some Ironman, Iron Person, we'll call it, whatever. And everything in between. Like every time I'm talking to her, she's signed up for a race that I had no idea she was signed up for. She's like, oh yeah, I'm doing Mount Tremblant next month. I'm like, I had no idea you were training for Mount Tremblant. So that's awesome. So she's definitely an endurance junkie like the rest of us. She is in her early 60s, which I know is hard to believe. I look like the older of the two here in this group for sure. That's why I shaped it. Like I got to look a little bit younger for camera. So I thought Ronnie would be an awesome guest because she is just thoughtful and she's really inquisitive. Like just you always have good questions. You are always thinking about how you're preparing for the upcoming season and what went last time. You're a consumer of knowledge, right? You're always watching documentaries and reading books, which always spurs just great questions, I think. So with that, welcome, Ronnie.
Thank you,
What do you got for me? Let's bring it.
So you happen to mention the idea that I'm in my 60s. I'm actually going to be 65 next August. I do think that endurance sports, since I started about 20 years ago, maybe 18 years ago, has definitely helped lengthen my telomeres, or at least not shorten my telomeres. I'm a big believer in telomere health. And I feel like I just have to keep moving forward to, keep my body strong. But lately, since I left New York City and now reside in Western Massachusetts, my community isn't as robust as it was. I definitely find that, training alone is, it takes a lot of effort to constantly train alone versus just occasionally train alone. So, I feel like my same level of intensity and desire to train the same way isn't quite up to snuff as to where it was. And I'm a little bit bummed about it, and so I just, I don't know if there's any advice on this or, I definitely sleep a lot more now. I try to get 8 hours, which is unheard of. I used to live on 5 hours. So, that's kind of where that's like the 45,000 foot view of where I am right now.
Yeah, I see a couple things in there. All right. One is the premise of that question really is like, where's that motivation, right? Do we still have that motivation? Does it start to wane as we get older? And it's a great question because I struggle with that a little bit myself. I just recently moved, as you know, to Vermont from New York City. And I get the community thing now of that it is such a tight knit community because we live in this small little bubble,
Right.
right? Like the beauty about Western Mass, the beauty about Vermont is we have so many roads and so many places to go. And the thing we used to complain about in New York was like, oh man, Central Park again. Like
Mhm.
I'm going to go around this 6 mile loop again. Like if I think about how many times I go around that loop, between biking and running in a week, it's just like, oh my God. But with that little fishbowl comes a huge community because we know anytime we go into Central Park,
Right.
you're going to run into somebody that you know if you want to. If you don't want to, you can avoid it, right? But I know like any morning at 6 a.m., I can go in there and ride with people. Where in Vermont or in Western Mass, that's not the case,
Right.
right? We're spread out. We have all these beautiful roads that spread us out. But the problem is you really have to be proactive in trying to find that person being like, hey, let's meet at this place at 6 o'clock and go for a ride. It's really hard for that scheduling part. And for people, I think probably more so for you than me, you're a social being, right? You like that interaction. You
I
like
like
I
people.
love having you on the Zwift rides because I love having the conversation and I don't want to have to lead it, right? So I'm like, Ronnie's here. Awesome, right? Like it's going to be a talkative group. Um, so I think I don't know if that is much, that definitely hurts motivation, right? It's easy to get up and see somebody. Tuesdays and Thursday mornings riding with you guys on Zwift is way easier for me to get up out of bed,
Right.
right? Yesterday I was like, I'm going to get up, I'm going to work out early so I don't skip it in the afternoon. I didn't because I
Mm.
didn't have to meet anybody. And what did I do? I skipped it in the afternoon.
Mm.
Now in New York, I would have never done that because there would have been somebody in the park that I was planning on seeing. So I think that comes with just logistics, right? Or where we are in the world, not necessarily by age. Now, the other part, and you and I had this conversation actually about a year ago, maybe a little bit earlier. You were like,
Yeah.
and what did I say? I want you to take your gravel bike and I want you to wear a t-shirt
Right. The t-shirt
and
ride
go
theory.
for a t-shirt ride.
Yeah.
And the idea there was we don't have to be training for something to enjoy what we're doing.
Right.
And I think the hard part for us as we kind of continue on this endurance path is like, well, what else do you need to accomplish, Ronnie? I mean, think of all the endurance stuff that you've done,
Yeah.
and you've checked that box. You're like, yeah, Ironman did it. Ragnar did it. Marathon did it.
Ultra.
Like
Remember the ultra?
ultra did it.
That was great.
So like part of that thing is, you know, listen, we're New Yorkers at heart,
Yeah.
right? And I think everybody is to a sense. And what I mean by that is we're type A. And New York is a washing machine, right? New York is that rat race. And we think of it as a rat race in business and that we're trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? Like, got to get that next promotion, got to get working, got to make more money. But as endurance athletes, we're also type A and we're stuck in that rat race. That community that helps inspire us also drives us crazy.
Right.
Oh, she's doing an Ironman again? Oh, I got to do an Ironman.
Mm.
They did this? Oh, I got to do this. Right. And then when we kind of remove ourselves from that into these more remote areas or seclusion, we have to ask ourselves, and you have to ask yourself, like, what's next for you? Like, what's your, that's awesome. What's your Everest? Like I always say, and I bring this back to me is I signed up for my first Ironman and I was scared shitless.
Mm.
Like it scared me. I was like, who in the world would do this? And that was the impetus of doing it because I was like, can I do this? And I've always said this is, these endurance endeavors are about trying to find your limit, right? Who am I as a person and how far can I push mentally and physically? Some people are more physically oriented, like how fast can I do this? How far can
Right.
I go? Some people are more mentally kind of driven of like, where's my breaking point? Am I going to quit? Am I going to step off the course? And who was the guy who created Ironman, Jim Connors or something like that? I forget, but he's got this famous saying of if you stepped off the course during an Ironman, no one would care
Right.
except you, because the other people would never have stepped on the course in the first place.
Mm.
So of course they're like, of course you would step off. Yeah, quit too, right? But you care. And that's the point of endurance sports. And that's what originally got you into this, is saying like, man, what can I do? And then every time you cross a finish line, to me, it's the confirmation that that was not my limit. And all this is to find our limits. So if I didn't reach my limit, then I haven't found it yet. I need another task.
Mm.
So, when there's people around us kind of pushing us for those tasks, and social media is, we all get caught up in Strava and social media and wanting to make sure that we look like we're doing the part. It boils down to, I think, that intrinsic drive boils down to you personally. And I think it takes some time for reflection for yourself to just say, what is it that I want? Like, what's the next challenge for Ronnie? Is it swimming around Manhattan? And work on that kickboard stuff we were talking about today on the ride, you know? But I do think our internal drive does start to dry up a little bit, because I think we accomplish so much as we get older, right? You think of like, you're like, done it, done it, done it, done it. Like, what's that next drive? I think you have to just be open to sit back and, read Outside Magazine and Triathlete Magazine and Trail Runner Magazine. And, I'm always finding a new race
Yeah.
through some sort of article. Like, I just found this 5-day gravel ride in Oregon,
Yeah. It sounds
right?
cool.
But I'm like, oh, it's such a cool kind of event to do. Do I
Yeah.
think it's going to tax me beyond my limitations? No, but I'm like, it's a cool event to do that I never heard about, right? So I think there's something out there that will spark you and get that intensity back. But I think you gotta find out what it is for Ronnie, not for what it is for the rest of the endurance community that we're just trying to keep up.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It's interesting because this summer when I was training for the Chicago Marathon, because I'm trying to do all Abbott 6 and I'm
Mm-hmm.
up to 4. And I have Tokyo and London left. And we decided to go backpacking in Sequoia National Park. And it was in the middle of my training. And I was basically, you know what? This is the opportunity to go backpacking way up into the mountains, and I'll use it as cross training. And I was a little worried when I got back because it felt like I hadn't trained enough. But then the race day came and I had a really great race. So much so that I qualified for this next year's Chicago Marathon, which I did sign up for because I'm
Of course.
recruiting a lot of my friends to come with me. So, I mean, I usually, like to move on, but the Chicago Marathon was so fantastic and the crowds were insane that I'm hoping that other people who have put in for the lottery will get in also. So, I do look forward to those, racecations. To me, that's like my ideal situation. So, but speaking of marathons, I definitely need a little bit more time to recover. And I'm really in a good place right now, knock on wood, injury free. I'm always injured with something. And so the recovery taking a little longer, is that like normal as we age, or what's the deal with that?
Yeah, that's age.
Hmm.
That is age. Like, there's no way around that. Like, as we age, we need more time to recover, period. Like, that's the hardest thing I think athletes have accepting. Um, I think I'm 47, so I think when I turned 40, that was it for running back-to-back days for the most part.
Right. I don't do that
Like,
either.
could I do it? Probably. Is it worth it? No,
Right.
it's not. And, that's a hard pill to swallow. I think that we start to see that. What I love is over the last couple of years with Whoop and Aura Rings and all this stuff is that recovery's become cool, right? It's become like recovery's become like another arm of training. Like, what are you doing to recover? It's not this
Right.
passive activity anymore. Recovery is very active. Making sure I get 8 hours of sleep. Like, what's my HRV? not having that extra drink because I know my HRV score is going to get affected
Right.
and things like that. So I think that's made it easier for me to take time to recover more because I can kind of promote that I'm recovering,
Right.
because again, type A, I got to be winning at something. So I'm going to win the recovering game. So that's a nice thing. But, 10 years ago, that really wasn't the case. You felt guilty for taking a day off.
Yeah.
You felt guilty because you weren't doing as much as you used to in the past. And what we have to remember is we don't get fit from training. We get fit from recovering from training.
Right.
So if we don't allow our body the time to recover, then we're not getting the benefit from the work we're putting in anyway. So that's just something we have to suck up as we get older and as individuals. Everybody's going to recover at a different rate, and we recover from different things differently, right? So if you think of like this baseline, and this is where if we think of like programming, right? We all read these programming books, and I can almost guarantee you 90% of the books that you pick up are going to be built as, when you look at your program, as 3 weeks of building intensity or duration, right? So 3-week build, 1 week rest, 3-week build, 1 week rest. And I argue that sometimes, especially for the older adults. Now, here I am saying like, yeah, we need to take more recovery, but I would actually argue that you might want to build for 5 or 6 weeks and then take a recovery week.
Mm.
Because if I'm building for 5 or 6 weeks, I can make smaller jumps from week to week,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if I have, say, 15 weeks to build up to a marathon, right? And I start at 10 miles on my long run and I need to build up to a 20-mile run. That means, if I build 1 mile a week, that's going to take me 10 weeks. Well, if I have too many rest weeks in there where I take a step backwards, that means I might need to make bigger jumps to get there. Right? So can I take smaller jumps, which is going to be easier for my body to handle on a day-to-day basis? And if I'm recovering better during the week, I don't need that 1 week of kind of resetting and letting everything come in. So I think we need to kind of change our concepts sometimes of looking at like what's been out there for the last 20 or 30 years and being like, is that really the best for you? Maybe you need to build for 5 weeks and Stuart can do 3 weeks.
Right.
Stuart's her husband, by the way, where I might build for 4 or 6 weeks, right? Like we all recover differently. So therefore, our programming should be slightly different, as well as, as we build our baseline. So you've been in this endurance racket for a really long time. So your baseline is pretty high, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if your baseline is 10 hours a week, well, you can recover from 10 hours a week pretty good. The problem comes into is when you get to 12, 13, 14, right?
Right.
Then we got to rest a little bit. Well, somebody who's not been in the training bracket for a long time, maybe they're only at 7 hours a week, right? So they need to recover for 7 hours a week like you recover from 10. So we do have that benefit of longevity, right? Like going to do a marathon for you is not a big deal. I mean, it is a big deal, but you're kind of like, been there, done that, done this 1,000 times. I'm going to go hiking for a bit. And that's why you had such a great run, is because you had very low expectations.
Yes.
Right? Like you were like, I don't know what's going to happen here. So you just let it go. And your body handles it, right? Like our mind usually gets in the way with these expectations of like, oh, I should do this. And you're like, we're on autopilot.
Right.
You're running a marathon, it's autopilot. Like your brain already knows how fast you're going to run. Just let it. So yeah, I think the recovery key is key. And that was, COVID, as bad as it was for the world, for me, it was a great experience as far as the recovery is concerned, right? Our studio shut down. I wasn't waking up at 4 o'clock every morning and I started getting 8 hours of sleep. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I feel 10 times better now than I did 10 years ago because I'm actually sleeping and recovering.
Yeah. Yeah. I love my sleep. So I've never been able to say that before.
Totally.
Yeah. So speaking of marathon, in 2016, I was doing the Boston Marathon for the first time, and I had raised a lot of money. It was a charity spot. I didn't qualify. Very hard to qualify for Boston. But I had a heart event during that race, which I've talked to you about before. I had SVT, supraventricular tachycardia, which is a speed up of the electrical circuitry of the heart. And I didn't know what was going on. And of course, I kept running because I'd raised all this money for charity, to the point where I got to the halfway mark and I just felt like I was going to like throw up. And so I got medical care. I had an ablation, heart surgery, all great, turned out great. Haven't had any issues since. But I will say that I don't love going into zone 5 now for like longer than like 2 seconds, 3 seconds. I just don't like to push my heart like that. I feel like, oh, my heart, it recovered. Thank you, heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I mean, some people say, zone 5 is really necessary. And so I wanted to talk about this, like pushing, when we used to, even at tail, when we were on the bikes and we were just pushing and pushing and pushing really hard. What do you think?
Yeah, I think zone 5 is needed for a healthy heart, as long as your heart is capable to handle it, right? So assuming we have the okay and the medical clearance, like they're like, yep, you're not on beta blockers or things like
Right.
that, right? Because beta blockers are holding that heart rate down to not allow it to get up there.
Yeah.
So if we have the medical clearance, then yes, it's needed for many reasons, but that's really why that's our VO2, right? We're getting up to that VO2 max, and we're trying to strengthen that as much as possible, our ability to use that oxygen in our system, right? So from an aging perspective, that's one of the things we lose quickly. It's almost like strength training, right? And you had mentioned that too, is like strength training is so super important as we age. And it's not about gaining strength, it's about not losing the strength. But that's really the key there. And because as we stop using things, our body kind of gets rid of it. It's like, I don't need it, puts it in the closet, right? And we start to kind of become hoarders, and this stuff is just jammed in this closet. And the fact of the matter is we need that still, right? There's going to be parts in time in your life, in your day to day, where your heart rate's going to spike. Right? You need to run, or you need to get out of the way of something. We need those fast twitch motor units from strength training, like to kind of jump out of the way of a bus or whatever it might be. And if we don't have practice doing that in a controlled situation, which is working out, then how can we ever expect our body to use it when it needs it?
That makes sense.
And that's really the key here, is like, if we are concerned about it, then we want to do it in a controlled situation. And that situation is going to happen. It happens to all of us at some point in time. I mean, heck, even sitting down in our house, we can start thinking about a stressful situation. What happens to our heart rate? It starts skyrocketing, right? So if our body is not used to that, it's not going to learn how to deal with that and calm down. Or maybe we have a problem with a valve or something like that, because we're not working it on a day-to-day basis, right? Like it's always about adding something uncomfortable to our life so our body can adjust to it, get used to that pressure. So that way, when the pressure does come, the body can handle it appropriately. So just from a heart health perspective, absolutely. And just from a neurological perspective, absolutely.
So how long should that spike be? Whether it's in the pool or on the bike or running, like
zone 5?
Yeah.
Yeah. So zone 5 is basically categorized as being 8 minutes and under. Right. So anything over 8 minutes technically can't be zone 5. You'd be falling into zone 4, really, because it's VO2 max. So zone 5 would be considered VO2 max, which means that we can only sustain it for a certain period of time before the body's going to kind of shut down. Most of us are not going to get to 7 and 8 minutes anyway. Most of us are going to probably get to 4 or 5 minutes for a VO2 max effort. And if you think about like our rides, like our Thursday morning rides are usually VO2 max, and I usually cap them at 4 or 5 minutes with a nice long break afterwards, right? We usually get a 4-minute break along with it. It's a 1-to-1 ratio in those situations.
Okay.
And then the real question really kind of comes down to is how often do we do this, for how many minutes total?
Right.
So I view it as kind of like once, maybe twice a week, depending on training program. Even if we don't have a dedicated VO2 max day, which sometimes we don't during the year, I'll still have VO2 max efforts mixed in there. It might be 1, 2, or 3 little efforts mixed in there just to kind of keep our hand on it. But if you're doing a VO2 max workout, if you notice like those Thursday workouts, we typically spend somewhere between 12 to 18 total minutes at zone 5 mixed into that hour. 7 2-minute intervals, or it's 12 1-minute intervals, 3 4-minute intervals, right? They all add up to 12 or 15 or 16. So typically what I'm doing from week to week is we might start with 1-minute intervals, but we're doing, a block of 6 and a block of 7, right? So we're getting 13 minutes. And then the following week, maybe we're doing 6 2-minute intervals. So it's 12 minutes, same amount of time, but those intervals are longer, which is more intense. And then we do 4 3-minute intervals, 3 4-minute intervals, same kind of thing. So the minutes at VO2 are about the same from week to week, but the duration is a little bit longer to allow your body to get used to it. So start slow, short intervals, 1 minute, and then gradually build up as you get that comfort. And give yourself time to recover afterwards. That's the real key. Again, it's about teaching your body the recovery part is as important.
Right.
I want my body to get used to being up here, getting this level up here, but I also need my body to get used to being like, all right, well, I'm up here. How the heck do I get back down? Yeah. Right? Because that's what we ultimately want. Like you were saying, it's like you do this effort and afterwards you're just like breathing. And like, it's like, I can't catch my breath. I can't settle back down. Well, the more and more we do that, the more and more your body's going to learn how to settle back down.
Right.
And slow that breath or take that deeper breath. It gets the practice how to do it. And that's the important part, because I want that moment of clarity when something stressful in my life happens, something happens to my kid or I have to respond and my heart rate jacks up. I still want to be clear-headed. I still want to be able to make proper decisions for myself and for possibly a family member that might be injured or in danger.
Right.
And by practicing the stressful moments in my life allows my body to handle those moments when the shit hits the fan. So you got to do them. So I'll see you every Thursday.
Yeah. So you were talking about strength training, and that is something that I've just recently really been religiously incorporating. And I found that my lower back in the beginning was jacked. I mean, it was really with the weightlifting and whatnot. But I, I'm still with it, and I'm just trying not to overdo it, so I don't injure myself again. So what do you think in terms of the number of days of strength training versus, cardio, etc.?
Yeah. So I think strength training is awesome. I think everyone should do it. I'm guilty for not doing it for many years, but I've changed that now to where I'm doing it now. I mean, if you want to better yourself as an endurance athlete, strength training should be a part of your program sometime during the year. And how often we do it changes. It comes down to purpose. So off season, most of us are in our off season now, especially in the Northeast, right? October to say like January or so. That to me is the time to really work on something that we don't have the time to work on during the season itself, right? And strength training is one of those. We can really think about adding strength here during this time because we don't need to be race fit. You're not running a marathon in 6 weeks. So we can really spend this time. If you're looking to get stronger, gain strength, then I think you need to be lifting a minimum of 3 times a week.
Okay. I'm doing that. Yep.
Right. So good 3 times. With heavy weights, like it's got to be challenging. Like we definitely want to challenge the body. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then during the season, right, as we start getting back into kind of prepping for races, maybe 12 weeks out, maybe strength gaining isn't a priority anymore. Strength maintaining is a priority. To maintain the strength that I have gained, you need to be lifting at least once a week. Use it so you don't lose it kind of idea. I'm not looking to gain anymore. I'm just looking to maintain, right? And then I can use those other 2 days for my swimming, my biking, my running, or whatever it is that's more appropriate to the test I'm going to be doing sooner. So I would say if you want to gain strength, then you need to dedicate time for that. And that should really be a priority. That should be 3 times a week. If you want to maintain, minimum of 1 time a week up to maybe 2 or 3 if you have the time. But again, we're not really trying to tax the body that hard. We're just maintaining it. And then real quick on strength training. There's a major difference between strength training, the purpose of strength training, and endurance training, how our body views this. Okay. And what I mean by this is endurance training is about becoming economical. It's about becoming good at something, right? I want you to be able to run a mile using less calories, right? More efficient is what I want.
Mm-hmm.
So weight training or strength endurance training is all about becoming really good at something, being successful. I want to finish that run feeling good, not struggling too much most of the time and really getting efficient at those movements. Strength training is about failure. It's about not being able to do what I ask the body to do.
Right.
Because if my body is able to lift that weight, the goal amount, well, at the end of the day, my brain's saying, well, all right, we're good.
Right.
I don't need to gain any more strength. You asked me to do this. I did it. We have enough to do that. We're good. Where if I ask the brain to do something and we fail, I was not able to get 3 sets of 10. I got 2 sets of 10 and a set of 8, right?
Mm.
Then the brain's saying, oh, geez, Ronnie's asking me to do this and I wasn't able to do it. So she's going to ask me again. So what do we need to do to be able to gain this? Well, we need to build more muscle fiber, or we need to use more of the muscle that we have, right? So strength training to me is about failure. The brain needs to fail, so therefore it improves the body to get there. Endurance training is about success. Hey, we did that really well. I think we can smooth it out by doing this. I don't need these muscles to work. I don't need these muscles to work. We can fine tune this movement to use less energy, less effort, and become more economical. So I always go into the mindset of my 2 workouts differently. When I go into the gym to lift, I'm thinking about failing.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm going into my run or my bike or my swim, I'm going in with the idea of being successful and smooth, that I could have done more. So my body figures out how to do it easier.
I never heard of that. That using less calories for running. Like that's never computed in my brain. Like it was.
Calories are going to be about the same, honestly. Like we all burn about 100 calories per mile. It's more
Right.
about energy use, right? It's more about economics, right? So yes, you end up using a little bit less, but we're trying to get a lower heart rate for the same activity to normalize it. Plateau. We're literally thinking like endurance sports is about plateauing.
Right.
It really is, right? Like I can just handle this. And then we kind of lose fitness and we gain more and then we plateau again. Where
Right.
strength training is you don't want that plateau. That's maintaining. We want to fail.
So it sounds like I need to lift heavier weights now.
Most likely. Most likely people don't lift heavy enough would be my thing. Just take it easy the first kind of 6 to 8 weeks because our muscles respond very quickly. Our connective tissue does not respond as well. So in the US, in our training, we're typically very conservative and we say like a good 6 to 8 weeks, like nice light weights, kind of getting the movements down pat, because that's really allowing the connective tissues, the tendons to really start to kind of get taut, right? Kind of deal with that force. So we don't end up kind of tearing a muscle there because that's usually where that breaks down. The muscle itself, like tearing the muscle itself is really hard. They're very resilient. They adapt very quickly. So I say be conservative for the first couple weeks and then gradually kind of start kicking that weight up.
Right.
6 to 8 is really the rep range for strength.
Okay. And my one last question is, I'd like to do another full Ironman, but the idea of like taking on another full-time job of training for a full is just very unappealing as we started the whole, conversation. But is there a workaround, like, for that amount of training? Is there like considering the fact that I've done 4 full, but is there any shortcut, so to speak, or do I have to go through the whole regiment every single time?
There's no shortcuts.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. The real question comes down to is how do you want to do the Ironman? What are your expectations? And if you are looking to PR, well, you have to do as much, if not more work than you've done in the past. If you're looking to just enjoy the day and finish and enjoy the process of training for this, then yeah, you can do it with less time or less intensity as long as you're doing enough to get across the finish line,
Right.
right? How much time do we have to spare and things like that?
Right.
Typically, most people probably train too much.
Mm-hmm.
That's my guess, especially I think in the Ironman world, it was always about more, 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 more.
Right.
And again, like we said in the top of this podcast, it's about recovery. And if you and I expect to train the same way we did 15 years ago, we're not going to recover from that. So why train that hard?
Exactly. And that's what I'm sort of getting at, is that, I couldn't imagine training the way I did before now. It's just,
And
getting up at 4:30 every day. I just don't
it's
have it.
crazy.
I don't want to.
Yeah, well, you don't need to, right? You're like, I don't have to do an Ironman. Been there, done that. If you want to do the Ironman, then that means you want to do the training along with it,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
right? And listen, I have no doubt that if I said to you, Ronnie, this weekend on Saturday, I want you to do an Ironman. If you complete it in the 17-hour cutoff time, I will pay you $60,000,
It's like hell.
right? But if I said, listen, I'll give you 60 grand Saturday night, you finish it, I give you 60 grand. I'm pretty sure you'd get it done. You'd feel like crap.
Yeah.
You'd feel really bad the
Yeah.
next day and the week after, and you'd probably end up hurting yourself.
Yeah.
But you could do it. And that's my point,
That's
is
a mental thing. It's a mental, if
all endurance sports is mental.
Yeah.
We're not going that hard to where it's like, oh my God, I can't,
right.
I can't go anymore, right? Your body has the calories and the ability to get you to the finish line. Biggest part about Ironman to me, for most of us, the point end of the spear, those people racing trying to get to Kona, that's one thing. That's very physical and very mental, right? They're trying to do it at a very fast pace. Most of us, mid-packers and back, it is much more a mental activity than it is physical.
Right.
We're building our body physically so that way, the next day we're not hobbling around, right? We're building ourselves that to handle this. But really all this training is doing is really making us mentally capable to believe that we have the right to be out there and to attempt this. And then it's just it's an hourly fight during an Ironman
Right.
of being like, I'm done. No, I'm not done. I'm having a good time. Oh,
Right.
I'm done. No, I'm not. I'm having a great time. This is actually pretty cool. I'm going to do this. Oh my God, this is horrible. Who would do this, right? Like we just have that that roller coaster of emotions. And that's the challenge, right? That's the stuff we love.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying before, is like, that's what this endurance sports is about. It's finding that next one.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think an Ironman really scares you all that much, right? You can do it.
Right. It's just, that mental commitment of saying, okay, I'm going to get into that race car now, and I'm just going to go for the X amount of weeks and months that you have to train for. So no, it's fun. I'm glad to talk to you, because, it's a couple of my friends want to do another full, and they're like, will you do another full with me? And I'm like, I don't know. And now I'm sort of like, I could kind of see it down the road. Maybe not next year, but I can see it, and having it be another. I like to go to places, like, again, the racecation idea, where you go to a place
Totally.
you've been, and then you have a goal and whatnot. So
And doing it with friends and
yeah,
having that
no, it's
experience.
all about that for me. I've been a lot of places by myself, raced a lot of places, but right now I'm kind of into the whole, yeah, I did Chicago by myself, but I am very much into, if I'm going to do something audacious, like, do it with some friends, and make it worth the while. But I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate your knowledge, your expertise. You just go very deep and very wide, and there isn't anything you don't know the answer to, or you do quickly find out if you don't have the answer. So I do appreciate this, and also just kind of like the psychological aspects of being, in this sport. You really help get me personally through a lot of questions that I have about my own abilities, and where I am in this stage of life. So thank you, Coach Brian.
Oh, Thank you, Ronnie. I appreciate the questions. And I have a lot of answers. I make up a lot of answers. uh, and that's, what I should say to that is, all the answers that I give in coaching and as a whole is opinion, right? It's my interpretation of the information that I have gained over the years studying in college and then after college and my own experiences of racing. Always understand, coaches, everybody needs to understand this, is that coaches don't do research. We read research, right?
Right. You conduct the research, right?
Exactly right. So a lot of people are like, oh, through my research, I've found this. No, we don't do research. We do reading and experiences and talking to athletes. And, I've had a great experience coaching you, through a period of time. I coached your husband through a period of time. I've coached so many other different types of athletes. And that's the thing. It's that variety of athletes that I've gotten to work with over the time, from 18 years old to in the 60s, doing 5Ks to doing Ultramans and everything else under the sun, and experiencing what they've gone through and learned through that process. And that's the key. And that's the experience of a coach that I think is important is, what's that clientele been like? And that to me is the whole purpose of this, is to get my different athletes that I've had experience of either just working with or just riding with and training with and being around, because we all come at this with so many different questions and such different backgrounds and current life situations. Some people with new babies at home. Then you have us that have older kids or kids that are out of the house and we're in a different part in our life. Like, we're always going to be faced with different challenges, and those challenges change year to year. And that's what's so great about this sport, right? It doesn't matter if you're riding a bike, running, swimming, or hiking or walking or pushing a wheelchair. It's all of its endurance, and it's that mental challenge that we're fighting for. And, we need a support community, because there are going to be times where we're like, I don't want to do this anymore, but you do.
Exactly.
All right. So with that, like I said to Ronnie, I'm like the hardest winded.
Well, I'm going to give you the hook now and pull you off stage.
Totally. You did a really good job of segueing to that, by the way. I was like, oh, Ronnie's finishing this up for us. This is amazing. She's really good at this. Awesome. So I just want to thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you.
The endurance community wants to thank you for the great questions, because I'm sure they're all going to learn from this,
well,
as I did.
I can't wait to see the next crop of people that you get you convinced to talk to
do this.
I will learn from them too. So thank you for all you do, and hello to all my endurance friends, and give me a shout out on Facebook or something, or text me.
Awesome, guys. So Ronnie, thank you. Thank you for everyone for joining us. We'll be back soon with another athlete, and we'll see how long this sucker lasts. If you like it, thumbs up. If you don't like it, thumbs up anyway, and subscribe, and all that other stuff that I'm supposed to say at the end of a podcast. So thanks, everybody. Ronnie, have a great day. I will see you Thursday for our Swift Ride.
Okay.
All right, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.